Welcome to this demonstration of the Polarion license analyzer that's been developed by Garantis IT Solutions. So with this tool, we allow you to view your license usage. You can see some historical charts and tables, so you can see how the license has been used. And you can then analyze the information we display so that you can help understand if you have any peaks or if you have any limitations on licenses, and then you can optimize your license usage. So for example, you could switch an extremely active user from a concurrent license to a named license. And so we'll have a look at that in a second. But ultimately, this tool helps you make the best cost-efficient decision on how you use your Polarion licensing. So let's go into the tool and I'll give you a demonstration. There are three main reports, and so let's have a look through each of those in turn. So let's start with the license analyzer report. So here are some dates where you can have a look at a period of activity that you're interested in analyzing. So we can choose a start date and an end date. And then when you choose your date range, you can then apply that and you see the report updates. So the first table is a summary of your license usage per day. And you can see here the limit value is set to the number of licenses that you have for the various different types of licenses. And your configured value is the actual number of users that are in use at the moment. Okay, so let's start by looking at this first chart, which shows you your license usage per day. And you can see it's an interactive chart. As I'm hovering over this and going over the data, it's updating. You can also solo a particular license that you're interested in just by hovering over the legend here. You can see that changes the display above. You can also turn these off, so if you click on them, they become grayed out, and this is really good if you have a very complex, very busy chart. You can kind of narrow down and have a look at one particular license. You can also see here we plot the limits. So this is based on the number of licenses that you have, and so you can see they're all clustered here around the 30, which is what we have in this demo data set. So looking at the concurrent ALM user, it's quite interesting to see the various peaks of the license usage. You can see as the week progresses here, there's not a lot of activity over the weekend. And you can also zoom in. So by clicking and dragging, you can look at a particular range of that data that you're interested in. If you wanted to, you can then reset that zoom and go back and have a look at the entire data set again. But if we zoom in again on this particular period, you can then see how over a typical day, the license is used by your user base. And what's interesting here is that we actually hit the limit. So on this particular time of day, all of the concurrent ALM license uses, all the concurrent ALM licenses were occupied. So if someone else tried to then log in, they might be denied because the licenses are all used. But as a whole, you can see that happened a couple of times in this month. So this might lead you to think that maybe your license, your concurrent ALM user licenses might be okay. It might just need tweaking slightly to avoid these peaks and users being rejected from logging in because no further licenses are available. And you can compare some different license types. So here, for instance, the requirement user, you can compare that to the ALM. You can see that's a much lower use, and especially compared to the limit line, you can see the limit line disappears off the top of the chart here. But when you kind of look at it compared to the limit line, you can see it's probably a little bit underutilized. We can also have a look at the Pro license, and that looks okay. It's kind of in the middle here. And we can have also look at the QA. Again, that's probably quite low in its usage. And the reviewer one is quite interesting. If I just turn that off and solo the reviewer, you can see here there's a lot more periods where it has hit the limit line. So this one, for instance, could draw your attention because there's probably a lot of instances where users have been denied logging in if that's the only license that they have. So that's a quick overview of how to use this first chart, and shows you how you can then look at peaks and how licenses have been used throughout that period of time. So the next charts to have a look at are the login events. So you can see here we've got our named ALM licenses, which are mainly used for a couple of the system administrator and a couple of other users. But if we have a look at the next set of charts, you can then start to look and see on the concurrent QA license who are your most frequent users of that license. So you can see here QA user number one is using it quite a bit. This becomes particularly interesting when you start looking at some of the other licenses. So for instance, your concurrent ALM license, user 40 and user 2 are your very frequent users, with over 100 logins for this particular time period for user 40. And that's a good example where this user, perhaps if they are logging in that much and using a concurrent license for that amount of time, it might make sense to switch them to a named license, and that could free up this concurrent license and support some of the other users with that freed up concurrent license. So you get similar information for all the various types of licenses. So you can see here the reviewer again, this reviewer user 200, again is a very heavy user of that concurrent license. Although in this scenario, if they're a reviewer and they're using it that much, it might not make sense to move them to a named license, purely because it might just be a particular season in the project where they're having to do a lot of reviewing. That might change over time. But again, these plots help you and give you the information so that you can make those kind of decisions. So that's the first page, is this license analyzer report page. So let's go on and have a look at the next page, which is based around user activity. So this report gives you a little bit more details around your users and what their status is in Polarion. And here you have some overall statistics. So you can see your total number of users that you have in Polarion. You can also see the number of disabled versus active users that make up that user base. It can also start to show you, well, who hasn't really been using Polarion, so who hasn't logged in the last 3 months compared to those that have been logging in that time. And you can then also start to look and see, well, who hasn't made any changes and who has. And the report allows you to kind of delve into more details on that. So here you can see we've selected the active view. So what we could do instead is maybe have a look at those that haven't logged in for the last 3 months. So when we do that, the chart underneath updates. So, and you can limit the number of users as well if that helps you. So you can see here are all the different users that haven't been logging in that period. And so if we have a look at maybe some of the others, we can maybe see, well, who's disabled. And you can see here's the disabled user, and it shows you that they're in that status disabled. And if we have a look at the active users, we can then see, well, who they are. We can have a little bit more information about that user. But then quite interesting, we can then see, well, when did they last log in, and when did they make changes? And you can then go and have a look at those as well. So this report gives you just a little bit more information around your users and whether they're interacting and using with Polarion. And the final report is around users in their projects. So if we have a look at this report, you can see here I've selected the Drive Pilot project. This will allow you to select all the other projects that you have in your setup here. And you can then see, well, all the different users and what project roles they have within that project. So this is just a little bit of a shortcut, saves you having to go into the administration view and looking that up. You can see that from this report page here. And lastly, I'd just like to show you the license analyzer in the administration portal. And we can go into the global administration for this. And you can see here there's a entry in the sidebar here around the license analyzer. In here you can see there's some statistics, so you can see the current number of users that are online. And then you get similar charts that we saw before, but this is just around the last months of activity. So you can just get a bit of an appreciation of the license usage over the last month using these charts. In here, you also have the documentation on the REST API for the license analyzer. So if you wanted to create any custom reports, you can use either the REST API or the Open API. And this gives you all the documentation to allow you to do any custom reporting that you might need. There's also an about page, and you can also check in on your license for this tool and when it might expire. So that brings us to the end of the demonstration of the Polarion License Analyzer. Please do get in touch with us if you have any questions, and maybe if you want to set up a trial of the tool on your server.